So next up, we have an incredible opportunity in our panel session, Creative Aging as a Global Catalyst for Change, to dive deeper into some of these stories that Tomi, Sheila, and Pauline just shared. And you're going to hear, I think it was apparent in watching the videos that all three of them shared very different creative aging frameworks, right? Sheila shared a little bit of an arts learning framework. I know Tomi is going to talk a lot about civic engagement and the role of public government and community. And then in that last video, really a framework around self-determination, community agency, and care. And I think as we started off the day, all are really essential to changing culture, to making our communities more age-friendly and keeping our older adults engaged and thriving. So as we move into this next panel, I've asked all of our panelists to each prepare a 5-minute introduction that shares the national context in which the cultural rights of older people are being advanced through creative aging in their countries. And then to talk a little bit further about how that translates to practice. So Tomi, we're going to start with you again. Again, this is Tomi Laitio from Finland, currently residing in the US in a fellowship. And Tomi, I'm going to turn the mic to you again.
Thank you so much, Heather, and really nice to be here and also join this conversation about the mindset change that's needed around this work. My own background is very much around youth work. So that probably the work around aging has been the most transformative work that I've done in terms of my own personal growth in government. But maybe we can move to the slides. So I thought that I'll spend the 5 minutes on really kind of talking about the policy and the context where we do this work, both nationally and then locally in Helsinki, the Finnish capital. So in terms of starting from the Finnish context, I think it's worth noting that Finland is the fastest aging country in Europe. It is more extreme outside the capital region, but also our demographics are changing fast. So Finland is the second fastest aging country in the world after Japan, but fastest aging country in Europe. So massive change happening in the way that in terms of service need, but also in terms of people's rhythms that kind of guide their life throughout the day. The other thing that I would highlight is kind of a holistic understanding of health and well-being, which I think creates good grounds for us to do this work. Finland has been ranked as the happiest country in the world 6 times in a row, and it's worth noting that that notion of happiness that drives that work is this kind of holistic understanding of good daily life. It's more contentment, satisfaction, and meaningful rather than this kind of exaggerated moments of joy. And then the third thing that I would highlight in terms of context for working in Finland is that we are fortunate to work in a system where we have a very high level of trust towards government. So that really allows us to work with people, work with nonprofits in a actually quite an efficient manner. We can move to the next one. So I thought that I'll highlight a bit about kind of the system change and thinking change that has led especially our work in Helsinki. So my role was I was in the mayor's executive team, and then I oversaw these services, arts and culture, sports, public library, and youth, and also was in charge of the city's health and well-being coordination work throughout all the departments. And it's worth noting that we can only be successful in a city if we have good national policies. And I really want to kind of recognize that Finland, the ministries and national level has been working for decades on really building the case for creative aging and incorporating this approach both in our cultural policies and in our social and health care policies. And there's been kind of grants and funding for resource centers and networks in the country. So you've been able to kind of build this movement around this work. If I look at the work that's been done in Helsinki, I wanted to highlight kind of 3 things that I think have been really instrumental in taking this work forward. The first thing is that we've had these roles of a trusted broker. So we've had one or two people, Jenni Räsänen is on this call from the city of Helsinki, whose work has been partly funded by social and healthcare services and partly by cultural services. And being this translator between different government departments, but also between government and nonprofits, and making us understand each other a bit better. My experience from government is that often, if we don't have these translation and brokerage roles, often overworked and under-resourced people and organizations hurt each other's feelings if we don't have people who help us understand the realities that others are working in. The other thing that I would highlight is that we have, as a city, we have hundreds of thousands of touch points to people's lives every single month. So really, our work has focused less on these kind of standalone projects and more on incorporating the aspect of culture, the aspect of creative aging into the way that we do senior care, the way that we do urban planning, the way that we do social services or informal education. And really kind of building this movement across the government and empowering government staff in different departments to take this work forward. And then the last thing I would highlight on this is a new funding instrument. The Finnish legislation allows a system where a person dies and they don't have heirs or a will, the estate moves to the government's hands, and therefore the city that the person lived in is able to ask the government for that funding and use it for social and health policies. And through decades, or at least a decade of advocacy, we've been able to include culture into this work. And I would just highlight that this small change in social and healthcare policies led to 1.3 million euros more funding for creative aging work in the city. But it was only possible due to a decade of joint advocacy. And I would just highlight shortly a couple of things from, if we go to the next one, on what has been the impact of this work. And it really builds on that elevating daily life aspect that I think is in the core of Finland's idea of happiness. So culture is a priority area in our culture and well-being policies now across the city. That was not the case if we go maybe 10 years ago. We've been able to reduce stereotypes on age, preference, and ability. For instance, renewing our photography material and including more variety on age, but also avoiding the stereotypes of older people in public images being either these passive recipients of help or being these super grannies who don't have any limitations, and really bringing real people joy and experience into the photography and in our city's marketing materials. We've been able to, through this new grant scheme, create new employment opportunities. And I would just lastly highlight that what's been amazing is that we've been able to bring the world of arts and sports together into a joint movement, pushing for more funding and more attention to aging in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomi. That's really incredible. And thanks for sharing a little bit more about the context for the work. And we'll get more into that in just a minute. So now we're going to turn to two of our panelists from the United States. I'm pleased to introduce you all to Susan Ochen, a dear colleague from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. Welcome, Susan, who is joining Sheila Dean Ross, who you just heard from the Delaware Division of the Arts, to share more about their story. Susan, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Heather, and hello to everyone. Thank you to Tomi and Pauline and Sheila as well, and everyone at Lifetime Arts for having us participate in today's summit. I'm joining from the land originally recognized as home by the Nacotchtank people, now known as Washington, D.C. And I'm really delighted to be here to speak a little bit about the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies' recent work in creative aging. NASA is a nonprofit membership organization of the 56 state and jurisdictional arts councils of the United States. We ourselves are not a funding organization, but our members are, and state arts agencies play a pretty critical role in public funding for the arts in the United States. Around 2018, NASA began a very fruitful partnership with E.A. Michelson Philanthropy to launch a very unique public-private grant initiative called Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging, making use of the state arts agency ecosystem to cultivate new creative aging work across the US. Thanks to Michelson Philanthropy, NASA was able to grant out around $1.5 million to 36 state arts agencies to pilot creative aging work. And the key takeaway for us is that every state and jurisdiction in the US is so completely different, certainly in terms of geography and the political landscape, but more importantly, in terms of population and community need. Therefore, in this program, NASA aimed above all to ensure that the 36 participating state arts councils were empowered to design and deliver creative aging programs tailor-made for the older adults in their states. A centralized top-down approach just wouldn't have worked for this program. And indeed, we saw great success with states offering many different approaches to creative aging over the last 2.5 years, even throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw creative aging programs take shape in partnership with nonprofit arts organizations, individual teaching artists, state departments of health, veterans agencies, assisted living communities, libraries, and more. Speaking of libraries, I'm very pleased to turn it over now to my colleague, Sheila Dean Ross from the Delaware Division of the Arts for an on-the-ground look at what was achieved.
Thank you, Susan, for that intro. And we are so appreciative of the funding that has enabled us to get started on, like I said earlier, this creative aging adventure. Our project has had three-pronged approach. The Division of the Arts and NASA and E.A. Michelson provided the funding. The libraries throughout the state, the selected ones, provided a location, a free location, a safe space for the work to be created, and they attracted participants in their communities. And then the third prong was the teaching artists that brought the arts, the concept, and in some cases, the gelling of community into the library to create this whole program. So partnering with libraries throughout our state was one key to our success thus far. And the teaching artists and librarians that have received training from Lifetime Arts to better understand the needs of the older population was the other key to success. So the emphasis in our programming has been fun and enjoyment. As the librarian indicated earlier in the video, people retired to Delaware and they wanted simple, they wanted fun, they want to enjoy their lives. And so we've tried to create that environment for them. So programming is free for everyone. All they have to do is sign up. There's no applications or et cetera for the participants. So the librarians chose what art discipline they wanted to feature. And then they selected a teaching artist from our creative aging roster that they wanted to work with. So what's important to note is that all the teaching artists who participate in our program had to have had training from Lifetime Arts. We wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page and of one accord. So each workshop was allowed 8 weeks of sequential learning, and it ends with a culminating event, which is a reception type gathering and presentation to present and celebrate what was learned and what was done, whether it's an exhibit or a performance. At each reception that I attend, I gather the participants together and I just ask 3 basic questions. 1, did you learn something new? Number 2, did you meet new people? And number 3, did you have fun? And the answer so far has been a resounding yes. And the comments that the participants have submitted, such as the one you see on the screen, are heartwarming. And we have many, many just like this. Some of the stories you probably wouldn't even believe. So So the program has struck the right chord here in Delaware. Out of 33 libraries that exist in our state, the first pilot year with the NASA grant, we had 8 libraries participate. The second year, our Secretary of State was so enthralled with the program that he made a commitment, and we doubled that number to 16 libraries hosting workshop programs. Both the Secretary of State and the Director of the Delaware Division of Libraries are totally on board with this effort. Participants are still clamoring for more, and we plan to grow the project incrementally. In the meantime, I've been told that participants in the classes are managing to stay in touch with one another, be it going on vacation together, having coffee, playing cards, or continuing to do their art, which is what we want to hear. So in summary, we are creating community and we are creating friendships, one workshop program at a time.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And in so many ways, I know on the ground that you and others that are leading this work at the state level are very much doing that work of translation and building relationships amongst partners, as well as with older people in many communities and with our state libraries. So it's wonderful to hear your story. Thank you. Next up, we have Pauline again. Pauline introduced herself earlier, but for those of you who are joining, Pauline is with Charles Darwin University in Australia, also an honorary research fellow from the National Aging Research Institute. And Pauline, my pleasure to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. As I mentioned earlier, it's a real privilege to be representing our collaboration today and to sharing the work with such an international audience. And thank you to my fellow panel members and to Ashton, who raised so many incredible points that I hope will come up again when we speak in smaller groups. I would also like to acknowledge that this work really, I guess, worked quite closely with 3 particular Aboriginal community controlled organisations, Munkajja Arts Resource Agency, who you see here in this beautiful photo, the Jumpy Desert Weavers of the Ngarrindjara Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara Women's Council, and Ikunji artists who are in Pintabee Luritja country, not far from where I am now, or 3 hours down the road, the closest. And so we formed this collaboration as a research institute with 2 universities, 3 art centres and 2 aged care organisations to start looking at, well, what role do the art centres play in their geographically remote communities? These are communities that can be several hours away from aged care facilities, hospitals, under-resourced in infrastructure and all sorts of healthcare and so forth. And yet the art centres are this thriving community-controlled organisations, a network of about 90 of them that have really been developed in each specific community. And what role are they playing in supporting older people to remain in their communities? So we were really fortunate. We spent a lot of time coming and going from each of these 3 centres, and we sat down and interviewed about 99 people, so just short of 100 people. And what we learnt was that the older people and elders within each of these centres are really absolutely central to the operation of art centres in these remote centres, that the older people are the knowledge keepers. They keep culture, they keep country, language, kin really strong and connected. And so these are the really strong cultural determinants of health within these centres. And we were told time and time again, they're safe spaces. So they're not labelled as a healthcare centre, they're not labelled as an aged care centre, they're not labelled for young people or for old people. They're very much what Ashton was talking about in terms of this intergenerational, it's who you are, not what you're diagnosed with. It's who you're related to. It's what your role is within that community. It really sort of transformed those of us, including me, who has trained as a social worker and worked in hospitals and aged care centres, to really learn from a model that can disrupt all those constructs. We also learnt that they're providing an enormous amount of direct care. So they are on the ground, as was mentioned in the video, really keen to have artists involved in their centres, and they know that means collaborating with aged care services if they exist in their communities, including residential aged care facilities, noticing changes in someone's social and emotional well-being and being able to identify that and work with the family and older person to determine what might help to keep them strong and keep them connected. And so really they welcome partnerships with aged care, and unlike or healthcare providers, or many providers actually, and as Tony was saying, Finland is quite progressed in this area. I really think we have a lot to learn from countries like that, because I think we're just starting in Australia to think about the arts, health, ageing connection. So thank you.
For more information about the 2023 International Creative Aging Summit and to download our summit resource guide, please visit www.lifetimearts.org/ICAS-2023. And be sure to check out Lifetime Arts professional development resources and services linked in the description below.